It seems to me that human nature is seeking for what it cannot explain. Of course, there is the necessity for survival of the species, of the health, to prevail daily during the mortal life. And of course, during this parenthesis on earth, innerly the soul is searching for clues of meaning through narratives that become meaningful, faithful situations that give purpose, without which, of course, it's mesmerizingly abyssal to think about things we cannot comprehend. And thankfully, we don't think of it too often because, in fact, music essentially is a hyphen to some kind of an extraction of deep inside ourselves of some fragments of reminiscence of something that we don't manage to understand the purpose as a global meaning. But beyond that, it seems like music sounds, the etymology of words give us some clues through what they suggest to our psyche. For instance, interpretation is translation, but the translator doesn't come up with the meaning of what they say. They say something that has a meaning which escapes them, but they translate it as if singing in a foreign language phonetically. But even philosophers, enlightened people, people who have a capacity to vibrate with some truths that are understandable, or if not truths, revelations, call it by different words. But I find that like a child who hears sounds by ear and reproduces them as a baby in the language which the baby is talked to, and ends up by being mesmerized or charmed or amused. I don't know at what level all this can be more or less connected, by the meaning not, but by the sounds of some vowels or some syllables that resonate in the skull, through the ears. And by essence, baby talk is not supposed to be meaningful, but in fact is sensorial. And even if you don't understand the meaning of a word, let less of the sentence or of the chapter of a storytelling of the universe in which we are, you enjoy a single syllable for what it produces to you. You call it love, you call it charm, you call it enchantment, you call it passion, you call it drive. But I think it's all that. When the word interpretation for music comes to mind in English, in other language, like in Bulgarian, ispalnenie means to fill something with meaning, I guess, or with life, compared to the Dead Scroll notation. But it's true that in many languages, the meanings that are connected to the phonemes create also their own mysticism. For instance, in Russian, violinist is skripach, which means scratcher. Now, when you play the instrument like the piano, etymologically to play is something at best entertaining or taking your mind away in some kind of forgetness or willing forgetness of one's condition of human. Is it a substance of the soul? Is it something that connects us to, I find that to be often the case, to some kind of reminiscence of something we cannot fully restitute, like when you wake up from a dream and it seems so real, or if not logical, at least narratively filled with a meaning that makes sense. And when you wake up, if you remember some of it or all of it or some more or less, well, regardless, then you start understanding and trying to connect it to what you live in your life and say, I'm going to translate that meaning. And again, translate comes always in mind, not because of language, but because of meaning. So yes, when I play on the piano a piece that exists, I feel it with the meaning that it has to me. Of course, I'm mostly worried of not playing it correctly, because that's how we are taught. Between the publishers, the teachers, the schools, the competitions, the examples of the great performers. And so we feel very small compared to all these giants and the meaning of it all. But when you play it, it's no more a relation of hierarchy between those who know, those who teach, or those who already play masterfully. It's a connection between yourself and the piece. As a student, as a child, as a scholar, as a pianist, as a conductor, as a music lover, at all levels, through which we enter in the substance of the piece, we arrange ourselves across of some kind of faintly noticed narrative meaning to which we cling, and we feel like our own psyche connects to this section of this piece more than this, or this composer's expressive music inner world, that at some point of one's own development or culture or environmental situation of awareness, equally connecting as disconnecting for the same purposes. When you say I don't like it, or perhaps it means I don't comprehend it, or perhaps it means I don't need that, the tonal, polytonal, overtonal, posttonal, all these techniques about like writing a creative playwright, or in words that you use daily, but all of a sudden you arrange them with an impactful meaning towards a storytelling, a narration. So what is the narration that you do when already the piece is, so to say, existing not only, but it's already determined by the interpretations of your predecessors, by the teachings of the teachers, not to mention the scholars' editing of editions that frame, organize, shape, determine every detail of how you're supposed to play this grace note before, after, during the beat, half of the beat or quarter of the beat. In other words, the regulation through the notation of delimitation of the freedom that should be what in the first place brings us to music, is a yearning for something that charms us, that intrigues us, but that also, while perhaps not giving us the clue of what it's supposed to vehicle, inspires us because it feels like even if I don't know what it's all about, it's so good to be in there, in that ecosystem. Now, when I improvise or I compose, I notice that I feel liberated, but also almost like as if evaporating myself, meaning the soul connection, because I am tapping into something that I don't know what it is, and I don't try to understand. I'm attuned to what it tells me. In a way, improvising to me is more like following some kind of daydream, as if it's a storytelling that I need to get more deep into, for just atmospherically to be in it, rather than to make sense of it like of a dream. And the fact that essentially I don't know where it's leading me, compared to a piece that is written, published, and finished, within which I can think outside of the box, but at my expense, because there'll be always so many rules. Like in every topic of human nature's knowledge, there are so many ways of codifying the knowledge, organizing the vastitude of the understanding of things, engineering, philosophizing, organizing chaos of nature, or creating chaos in nature artificially. I still think that this is probably the core of it all. Something in human nature is destructive, but is it to reconstruct? Or is it because it's a revolt against something that is unbearable to not understand, comprehend rather? Or is it that through music, without lyrics, I mean, just sounds, harmonies, resonances, melody, acoustics, there's such power of persuasion of something that cannot be defined in words, or perhaps people who have very refined vocabulary. But then again, it depends on the language, because etymologically then it leads you to different conclusions. Some things can appear superficial, like for instance, why in French is bitter sweet, sweet bitter. So it's probably childish to even think about it, because at this level is compared to the finitude and the meaning of our relation to each other and to nature and our place in the ecosystem. But nevertheless, words define matters of ways of thinking. Of course, people generally deal naturally, and it's so difficult to survive in some situations more than others. Some are more privileged than others, and I am aware of that about my privilege. But I can still think outside of my box, like all of us do. Perhaps not too long because it's disturbing or disrupting, but sometimes we are given through technology and information that its vehicles a narrative that becomes the alpha and the omega of what it is, not to question further. And the beauty of human nature is that beyond the impulse of survival, which is naturally essential to even have a chance to have a thought, but once you start thinking, you detach yourself from your own being. So call it soulful, spiritual, which it is. It's this thing that drives us, that we don't define, that it's undefinable. And music is such an amazing medium that allows us to plunge ourselves for a given shade of a moment to, who knows, love, selflessness. People, as soon as they hear words like this, because of human nature's usage or misusage, are always defensive, because that borders on naivete. It borders on unprotection of one's own being, taking advantage of other beings. And that is something that humans do cruelly very well, unfortunately. But is it perhaps in their nature? And when it's positive and is not threatening, it becomes a message that is without words about some level of humanity that we can perceive, or through music, be it entertaining or expressive or reflective or whatever type of music. I don't talk about genres here, I speak about what we do when we receive music, or we make music, or we share music, or we immerse ourselves in a musical world or universe, is because somehow I think that it gives us this parenthesis from the ephemeral instant of life to perhaps glimpse at something that is so enticing or inviting or mesmerizing, just like a baby with a diphthong in the mouth, tasting it just almost like the taste of a taste bud discovery of this or that food. And so it creates a sense of awareness of becoming part of some kind of community of humans. And the good thing with music is that it's not self-imposing unless it's used as a propaganda tool, but it's mostly used to vehicle emotions, titillate excitements by pulse in pulse, by rhythm if you want, by dance, by the body language that finds in music its own way to blossom, its own inner gazer out. And so, yes, there is music for dance, there is music for reflection or prayer, there is music for charming, there is music for seduction, there is music. In fact, it's not for, it is by itself. It's because it's seducing us that is seductive. It's because it's inspirational that it's inspiring. So yeah, as a musician, I feel that I am in the situation of being a hyphen between the one don't know what, but incredibly tempting to be in it more, to, if not to understand, just be in presence of an atmosphere, let's put it this way. And then what people hear from outside of what we produce, as if we bring down to earth some inner world's imaginations. Of course, if it's our own music, then in the terms of invented music, though, that also could be a question, if it's all a reminiscence of something that comes from somewhere, that we dig to a certain extent, and that becomes meaningful to those who can do it differently with words, sounds of expression that bring them to colorize or to shape and to translate what the music in its harmonic or dissonant consonants and all that brings us to be. They can do it through their imagination about, or connection of sounds to colors, to shapes, to architecture, to history, to it seems like once you open yourself to it, yes, you're unshielded, but you also receive. You don't know what, but it's so appealing. So you want to understand. So the technique is more because you're attracted and deeply enamored with the sounds that you deal with music. But is it a predisposition more than to images or to other type of form, of shape, of imagining things? Perhaps unstructured, perhaps just thoughts, the mathematic beauty poetically of the universe's organization through science that describes so many things that can make us wonder, just more and more and more wonder, while trying to more and more try to understand. And then it's preferable to hold to faith, because it's in fact a solace that's reassuring compared to cruelty of life or of people or of nature. But by essence, an animal is not cruel by eating another one if it's part of the chain of the ecosystem. We cannot without bees, but we prefer not to see them. So in a way, is it that the human nature brings us to be so exclusive and disruptive and possessive? Even at the very superficial musical level, we say, my sonata by Beethoven. It's very possessive, but in a way, if it weren't, then why would you even try to play it well? Unless it means to you, and you go here and there to learn how to. You trust that you'll be told this by the teacher, how to reach your own deep meaning of what it is supposed to be, even if you sort of faintly know at the get-go, because if you seek the guidance of a specialist, is that you already are interested in the domain which you want to explore, because there is attraction, meaning to doing it. Of course, it appears superficial and meaningless to most people because of the economic system on earth that is made so that everything is constantly expensive and unreachable and exclusive. And so the survival becomes philosophically something that excludes the capacity to afford such concepts of thoughts that don't nourish you in terms of food and medications, which manage to solve some of the physical ailments, and you still search for a meaning for your soulful expression of what life is, to each of us differently. A pursuit of a goal or a hope or a love or selflessness or selfishness, regardless, it's all about some kind of level at some point of egotism. I know that all these words immediately, etymology of words, connects thoughts to different points of view, and then it can even create wars when there are misunderstandings in the translation of the concepts between worshipping, between the universal language of the universe being mathematics and science, especially chemistry. Elementally, you understand a lot of things about planets you can never reach, but you can already define what type of elements that exist on earth that they also have. So what does it have to do with other than the feeling that we sort of belong to something bigger than us, obviously, bigger than what we can reach, but we can define elements that brings us closer to this communality. And this communality in music is, oh, I like Mozart, oh, I prefer Chopin, oh, I prefer the Rolling Stones, oh, I like to hear when I need for my own fulfillment, headache, hope, passion, Ella Fitzgerald, or ethnomusic from Mongolia. It's an universe that is in fact so diverse and beautifully representative of what humans are, this kind of blossoming of differences organized by culture and religion and some kind of organization by states, which we see evolves through the civilizations who appear and disappear on the larger scale through the thousands of years, all these millennia. And they must have also wandered the way we wander, perhaps differently because of their fears compared to ours, but ours are not communal fears. They change from a point of the planet to another. The state of mind of people next to the sea, or people with an awareness of something ancient that they connect to biblically, or some others who are just in a situation where they're shaped by the nature of the geography of the place, of the freezing or the burning heat, and that is probably why I find so beautiful that musicians can travel to search for a communal classicism in classical music, which means there is a universality of Mozart being perceived in South America differently than Asia or Africa. Or perhaps there is something that for a different reason means or could mean something. So you can wander without education, without a mindset organization, without a culture, is difficult to comprehend. If you cannot read a book and you're given a book, you look at the signs on it with bewilderment, because you don't see meaning, you only see the design of the signs. It's like hearing the sounds just by resonance, not by what they mean. And once you put vowels and consonants and diphthongs, all this in a language is to vehicle purposely concepts, not only but also nature's translation in words or in concepts or in phonemes, in sounds, in notations with different types of ideograms or cuneiformic and all this. But it's all about abstract mind. It's a paradox to search for it, because you want to know, what did the hieroglyphs mean when the Egyptians wrote them until Champollion in the 19th century read Rosetta Stone. Again, a translator. He didn't write what was written on it or vehicled through it, but it's the attraction to understand or to penetrate some level of the mystery of what is attracting us. Is it because it's mysterious that it's attracting? Perhaps. I find that music sometimes, because of our own seeking nature of our soul, find some solace or titillation, excitement, alternatively in music, that, or through music rather. So we think we invent new music, or we play the music exactly as written of the others, but possibly we don't invent it, we reminiscent, or perhaps we extract it from some old ancient awareness of our subconscious, our intuition, our we feel it, but we cannot always explain why we feel it, but maternal instinct, it's all about love and selflessness. Give to the other and be attuned to the other or to the others, and then some more than others are attuned. And when you narrate what is already written with a beginning and an end, and you manage to bring into it, or you dare, after you're told, don't do this, don't do that way, it's not supposed to, this is not the right way, you should learn from me, from them, from here, from there. And there are different chapels of thoughts that organize the tradition and say it's not supposed to be this way. So yes, it's all by exclusion that you determine what it means to the people who vehicle the meaning by excluding other meanings. And if you objectivize, then you think, oh, in fact, it means so many different things to so many different people, therefore it's going to mean something different to me too. Unfortunately, when I say it, I hear myself saying it, and I find that so banal. And I'm sorry that I don't have that vocabulary for what I can think to express through the words. Possibly I bypass that by doing it on the sounds or through the sounds. Are they like sound test buds? Are they like an open inner mirror to something abyssal that calls us, scares us, or teaches us, or pushes us to? You call it passion, drive. People call those things because they don't know how to call them if not. And of course, once you call them, you fill them with that meaning that is excluding others. So to be tolerant is an easy word, but it's so difficult to place in one's own behavior. Earnest behavior of tolerance. People pretend to be, others are accused of not being enough, but generally nobody really is, because I think it's scary. It's easier to delimit, put fences in every mind process, and this way it's reassuring, organized and sectionized, and perhaps it's necessary, because if not, it becomes chaotic inside us like outside. Are we the reflection of that chaos, or do we project our fears to create more chaos because it's in us? Why can't we not have to wonder things that we cannot comprehend, but which attracts us? And I find that music is at least a safe way to explore some of these abyssal situations of human being without the danger for life. And of course, it's a privilege once you're fed, educated, and protected by advancements of science for obvious reasons for which you would have died a few centuries earlier in given geographic area. So in music, we serve so many composers who died, to our view, too early, and even if in their time period mortality immortality, child or even adult life, was higher. Outer wars and outer diseases, just life, eating, loving, it's all dangerous for the health, but necessary, regardless how we deal with it or try to. Is it because we search for immortality, or of course illusion of it by being many more minutes on earth than others? And I regret a lot, like all composers who we serve when we are in music making, serving the muse. What would have Mozart written at 70, Schubert at 48, just to say a number beyond the 30-something where they died? How would have their intellect developed, not extracted outside of their own realities of life, of wars, of diseases, of poverty, of famine? Were they just the produce of a time that couldn't be reproduced else, and then we reproduce it today outside of its context, on instruments that they didn't play, with group of audiences of electronically disseminated or put together in large halls? The very concept of sharing music or organizing the sharing of music, again to satisfy that soulful, I think, yearning of humans, changes so much, but somehow the pieces themselves, like ancient writings, even if not read in the original dead tongue of by today, the vehicle meaning between the Greek philosophers, the Sumerian narratives of their own mythologies. People need mythologies. Storytelling, etymologically. So fiction is stronger than biography when you write the story of somebody whom you create as a character that is a composite version of different type of humans and their shortcomings or greatnesses. Or you describe somebody whom you study historically and you write a book about. And you wonder to which extent these two elements are not in literature always intertwined, the biographic and the fictional. I think is for music the same. It's the same Beethoven sonata, but it appears differently under the fingers of a different pianist. Perhaps for the sake of it, or perhaps because there are certain things beyond the organization that the studies formats you in, to think, to organize, to even gain the technique to express. You end up by expressing the inner humanity in you. Just like a baby has its character at birth, regardless of the genetic code material that they inherit, that they're not just reproducing. For some things, the genetic code is predisposing, but the free will and the situation in which they appear on the time period of a given civilization, or it changes everything from the original appearance on earth. Apparently not having asked for it, wondering why until when. And once quickly finding ways to reassure, give solace to those disturbing existential questions, I find music to be the most personal, individual connection to this dimension that is beyond us, but that's in us, the macro and the micro.